Hello, everybody. This is Mark Cooper from IAC, and welcome to the first official webinar for the 2020 IAC Meeting Room of the Future research. I am super excited to be sharing with you the results of this research. It is a sneak peek. We will be publishing the full report within the next 10 days, towards the end of this month. But for now, I'm excited to be able to share a lot of data and content with you that builds upon what is 7 to 8 years of the IAC Meeting Room of the Future research. But just before we get into some of the data and some of the content and trends that have been reported, welcome once again to the IAC Anytime platform. For those of you who joined IAC Virtual Connect, you'll be very familiar with it. But just in case you haven't, I'm sure a number of you are joining for the first time. It's a little bit different to the Zoom platform, and let me help you navigate around that. So you may already have noticed that there is an attendee chat box there. Please use the attendee chat box to be able to communicate with colleagues from around the world that have come together for this 45-minute webinar. We also have a cool emoji section as well, which sits in at the top of the attendee list. So you can send your thumbs up, or if you disagree with a trend, feel free to send a thumbs down. We can communicate that way. Somebody's already got there first, so looks like you have no problem in finding that. Over the next 45 minutes, as well as sharing lots of information with you, a couple of points. We will have a couple of polls that we'll have, so we'll get your views and interaction. Do use the Q&A section as well. My colleague Mehdi is keeping a close eye on that, so at various points during the presentation, I will pause and we will have a look if you've got any questions. So use the Q&A section, or use the chat section to talk to each other, or use the emojis just to give us your views as to whether it's a good trend or a bad trend. Without any further ado, I would like to carry on with the presentation, and I'll take it through to the next slide, please, Mehdi. Perfect. So what we'll be taking a look at, I'll give you a little bit of background information, just enough on me in case you're not familiar with myself or you're a non-IAC certified member. Then we'll take a look at the overview of the Meeting Room of the Future initiative. And as we know, everything has changed this year. So I'll be talking to you a little bit about that and the context of which these trends and this research has been gathered and us sharing it. We will then break down into some of the key areas as it relates to meeting trends, so physical venue characteristics, meeting the objectives of a meeting, so collaboration techniques, learning styles, how we want to meet, how incoming generations are affecting that. We'll be looking at the culinary and the beverage trends, one of the biggest areas for change over the years. And then we'll look at communication, collaboration, and that includes, of course, technology. What I'm going to do now to allow the slides to be as big as possible, because they have got some graphs on there, I'm just going to take myself off the video, and then I will pop back at the time that we will ask questions. So we will continue through. Okay, we'll advance the screen if we can, Mehdi. That is perfect. So a little bit about myself. I've been with IAC now for around 7 years, and I was born to hospitality. This was my grandparents' village pub in leafy Warwickshire in the United Kingdom. So it's fair to say that I was working in there and learning all the skills of hospitality from an incredibly young age. I worked with De Vere Hotels in the United Kingdom, a member of IAC. A number of you from the US will certainly recognize Dolce Hotels and Resorts. Conference Direct, I had the pleasure of working for both Conference Direct and Sundial, where I was a meeting planner, and I would look after events for organizations like Pearson, Coca-Cola, throughout the world. So that was my opportunity to look at meetings from a perspective not of the venue and the operation of the venue, but from a meeting planner, from a customer perspective. All of that culminates in 25 years of being in this incredible industry and having a perspective from both sides of the fence. And hopefully, in a balanced way, I can draw upon both of those perspectives today. So let us jump into our first poll of the day. This is a business barometer. What I'm looking for here is to just get a little bit of rich feedback from you that will help us, and we will share these results in the sessions as we move forward. And all of you, I think, can probably see that now, and we can see the results coming through. So please do go ahead. We'll give everyone just a moment. Let's see how we feel about the reopening when a live meeting is going to be taking place at your property, either intentionally or you have physically got bookings in and you're preparing them now. Okay, so there's a lot that are talking about the fall, September, October, November. That's great to see. I think we probably, Mehdi, have got one or two more coming in there. So some are opening, 9% opening in May and June, and then we have July, August is starting to ramp up, but definitely September, October, November is the key time where we're expecting our properties to get busier. Okay, thank you very much for that. We will now move on and let's start to share some background information. So for those of you who are familiar with the IACC Meeting Room of the Future, on consecutive years, we go out to either the meeting planner community globally, or as in the case with this year's research, we go out to the venue operators. So that we had 50 venues that participated in over 3 continents, and they were surveyed in January 2020. This was a critical time because, as everybody is aware, in January, it was very much business as usual. So we took that snapshot, that screenshot, right before our industry was impacted with COVID-19. We deliberated as to the relevance of Meeting Room of the Future in 2020 because, of course, everything is changing. But we actually fell upon the decision that, you know, trends are born over a number of years. And just because 2020 is impacted in the ways that it will be, it doesn't mean that those trends, as they've built up over the years, will not be there when we come back to normalcy. So we have published the results this year, but interestingly, what we've done as well is within our main research that you'll see that's published, we've added a COVID-19 perspective area. So where we think that trend may be disrupted or further enhanced or speeded up because of COVID-19, we've added that perspective in there. Now, this is just not the viewpoint of IACC or indeed myself. We bring together a whole collection of industry experts with, you know, brightest minds in the global meetings industry. So we ask the venues for their opinion, and then we evaluate that data. And we've got an incredible global volunteer group that come together and look at the data and draw perspectives and further dig into that. So thank you to all of those, our colleagues at MPI, PSAV, Microsoft, Thrive Meetings. You'll see a number of familiar contributors in there that, as I say, know a huge amount related to their area of product expertise. So let us begin looking at fulfilling the meeting objectives, because this is a really critical part of delivering that overall experience before we get into what I call the nuts and bolts of the physical space, the food and beverage, and the technology. Now, as we look at that, 74% of you feel that it will be important to be more socially responsible and ethical in the future. Now, why is that important? Well, when we look at that compared to previous surveys, meeting planners told us in 2019 that it was critical for them. And, you know, this pandemic's taught us now how nature can take, can take control and that nothing is guaranteed to be forever. And that includes our planet. So when it comes to those reports that we see of the smog disappearing from major capital cities, us becoming more comfortable with the simpler ways of life, maybe traveling a little bit less. Well, of course, this all plays into our social responsibility and our social impact. Flexibility continues to reign with the food and beverage offer, and that this year was of near equal importance to those two. Now, of course, flexibility is going to be impacted in the short term because we don't want that flexibility when it relates to meeting room furniture and spaces. But if we think about this in another light, we have to be flexible to reset our rooms in these new and creative ways. Access to the interactive technology is deemed to be growing in importance even further also. So let's take a look at experience creation. Now, 94% of venues have said that experience creation is part of your role, which is excellent to see. In years gone by, we maybe had the perspective that it would always be client driven. When we look at it, venues have absolutely embraced fully that it's their role to be able to provide the experience creation. And we'll have a look in a little while at how that relates to the pressures that are on budgets and how critical it is to be a really good partner. Longtime collaborator Jessie State's comment in relation to experience creation is pretty much that she feels that to move attendees' mindset and to create these really strong experiences, our role as venues is absolutely critical to that point. So let's take a look now at the fact that it's no longer your parents' meetings. Sustainability practices need to be cost saving or cost neutral. That is what you've told us as venues. When we look at that from a meeting planner perspective, they're seeing it from a slightly different angle in the fact that they want to be more sustainable, but they don't perhaps have the budget to be able to support that. Creativity in the meeting rooms through the design, it is a top way to deliver the experience. Let's think about this when we look at the themed food and beverage offer. Let's think about our 6 senses, what we see, smell, taste, touch, and hear related to food. It's so important. When we think about our yearning to travel again as individuals and to go on holidays, think about how important it is that the food and when we think about that rich holiday experience, how much of a part the food and beverage plays. It is equally the same as it's related to meetings. So there is a trade-off currently, absolutely, between ambition and budget, and it's likely to be more so in the future. So the aspirations to be more creative, to bring in a richer experience, has sometimes been dampened by some venues' perspective where there's a high cost related to that. Now, what I would say to every IAC member around the world, and this is a really important part of our opportunity to capitalize on the current situation and what the needs are going to be in the coming months as meetings return. If you can just find creative, low-cost ways to be able to create fun, social experiences, and we'll pick up on 1 or 2 of those opportunities as it relates to food and beverage in a little while. The more creative you can be and respectful of budgets, the more and the stronger partnership that you will have. One of our participants this year made the very valid point that when they provide experiences, that actually the negotiation around the meeting space and the CMP rate tends to go away or become less of a critical factor. So let's do that. Let's use that. Let's deflect that price negotiation into providing a really rich experience. Now, this is a complex slide. I apologize, I can't show all of it on here, but I just want to pick out the most important parts. And you will be able to take a recording and look back on this. And of course, the full presentation and full guide will be published within the next 10 days. So you'll be able to get a lot of this data in detail. But, our social responsibilities and our impact has never been greater. We need to make more stories. We need to tell more because we are doing so much in our local communities. Our efforts to help and support, to feed our volunteers, to support our NHS, our health workers. There are so many great stories that are there. And our social responsibility and our social impact is going to be really important as we come out of this, because every one of us as individuals now treat that with a higher level of importance. Interestingly, right down at the bottom, if you can pick up on that, is where we start to get into the lower percentages, is the location and access. You know, which one of these meeting venue elements do you feel will be more important in the future than they are now? But actually, location and access is less important. I remember in previous years that was incredibly high. So look at how social responsibility and ethical operations have shifted. The food and beverage offer, the service style, the presentation, all of that has shifted up. And of course, in that top four is the access to interactive technology. Now I'm going to move into our physical spaces, the physical characteristics of the meeting environments. And of course, it goes without saying that these environments are going to look very, very different as we reopen in the weeks and the months to come. And a huge amount of work's taking place in that regard. I will take this opportunity just to mention to everybody on this webinar today that I will be publishing a pathway to reopening. It's a considerable guide. It's an even more detailed guide to the one we published back in early May, with a lot of tips and a lot of creative case studies from our IAC members around the world that we've been able to gather. So that's going to be a really important area. It will affect the physical venue characteristics without a shadow of a doubt. So watch out for that. I saw a thumbs up going across the screen there. It's always reassuring to hear that that these guides are valuable. So, has anyone heard of biophilia hypothesis? That's a really difficult one to say. I'm struggling with it, but you know, this is the whole concept of bringing the outdoors in. Our human craving for human nature connection is really important, and we're starting to see through these trends more and more work being done in that context. Now, again, let's put our COVID hat on for one moment. We feel at the moment potentially safer in an outdoor environment because, of course, as we unlock and open up, the first places we're allowed to go to are parks, recreations, it will be outdoor bars. So there will be this link between safe spaces and the outdoors. And so this is a point that I want to make. You know, any examples that you can bring into your meeting environments that bring that outdoors in are important. And I'm going to just share with you a short video that tells you a little bit about biophilia and the effects.
From the warm sun on our face to the soothing sounds of a waterfall, nature has the power to ignite the mind and rejuvenate the soul. Whether we realize it or not, humans have an inherent connection to nature. But in today's world, as cities grow and we become more dependent on technology, we spend more, if not most of our time indoors, which means that fundamental connection has gotten, well, lost. That's where biophilic design comes in. Bio what? We thought you might ask. Let's break it down. Biophilic comes from the word biophilia, meaning the love of life or living systems. Basically, it's the things in nature we love. And biophilic design harnesses that love and brings it indoors to create restorative environments for our physical and emotional well-being. It brings back that connection to nature that we all have. From workplaces and hospitals to urban living spaces and schools, studies have shown that adding biophilic elements to interiors and architectural design can reduce stress, blood pressure, and heart rates, while increasing productivity, creativity, and overall well-being. In short, we love nature, and it loves us back. So how do we incorporate biophilic design into our spaces? Well, there are lots of ways to bring the outdoors in. Combine organic forms with water features and outdoor views. Make subtle changes in air temperature and airflow, and add non-visual sensory stimuli like plant oils and calming sounds. Consider introducing patterns that mimic those in nature, such as natural colors, textures, and surfaces like wood and stone. All of these things work together to create a calming, restorative atmosphere for people to enjoy that provide a connection to the environment. And these are just some of the ways you can implement biophilic design. It isn't just about adding natural beauty to a space. It's about enhancing overall health and well-being too. Learn more about how to incorporate biophilic design into your spaces at interface.com/FYI.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully that was nice and clear for you. I'd like to pick up a little bit on biophilic and the outdoor spaces. One of the big areas of focus for us in the guide to reopening that we're working on at the moment is the appetite to hold more of the meeting outdoors. And I can share with you, there are members in Europe and the UK specifically that have actually created 2 brand new meeting environments outdoors, and they're bookable now on their systems. So they really have taken a leap forward just in the last few weeks as part of their preparedness for reopening into those spaces. But of course, if you're lucky enough to have those spaces, creating environments, where you're close to nature is really quite straightforward to do. So something worthy of looking at in more detail. A question has come in whilst the video was playing. Will the guides that we're going to publish have a section regarding legal language for COVID-19? Now, I will encourage Norma to be just a little bit more specific in regards to that whole legal language section. We appreciate that there are different legal positions worldwide. It is a global guide, and so state by state, country by country, continent by continent, it's all different. But what we can see is that we're starting to see some mention and reference now towards the waivers for attendees to be able to protect meeting planners or companies from litigation if somebody catches COVID-19 and or the responsibilities of venues. So do, Norma, be a little bit more specific around that area. If we can't include it within the guide, certainly if we've got any best practice or case studies that we can share with you offline, we'd be pleased to do that. But thank you for asking. So the barriers to your venue offering more flexible meeting spaces. This is a question that we include year after year. You can see it in this 2017-18 and then the 2020 study. And still the biggest barrier to being more creative, offering more flexible meeting space, is cost of investment. But I will make the point that it is becoming slightly less of an issue. Product storage issues are there. Product storage issues potentially are going to be there to a greater degree if our meeting rooms are being set up with 50%, 25%, 75% less furniture. So it is something that we're going to have to be mindful of, just as we're having to be mindful of the sizes of the tables and chairs if they are to respect social distancing. One thing that we've learned through the process of the last few weeks is that a table width is critical to whether you can only fit 1 person at it or 2 people whilst respecting social distancing. And that can have an impact of a room being 25% occupied or 60% or 70% occupied. So it's a really important area. Our colleagues at the Events Industry Council, when they looked over this through the incredible work they do on sustainability, pointed out as well is that as venues change their furnishings for whatever reason to be able to do that, do consider the circular economy and do consider other areas you're investing in furniture, like your social spaces, where maybe you can embrace a circular economy and look to recycled and repurposed furnishings. So now we're heading to poll number 2. We're keeping you busy today and keeping you active in here. So I would love to get your perspective. Before COVID-19 hit, did you have plans in play for 2020 to invest in updating your meeting rooms? Let's take a look. Let's have a look at where our intentions were pre-COVID, and then we'll come on and we'll ask another question in a moment. So a large number are saying, yes, you were planning to invest in updating the meeting rooms, whether that be from a design perspective, furnishings, decor, colour, interest, art, technology. That's a big percentage. 75% of you had that intention. Let's move on because we're time short now. This one is a really interesting poll. I would like to know I'd like to ask you now, if you answered yes to that, of which a number of you did, are you committed to still carrying out those improvements this year whilst you prepare for reopening, or has it led to you putting those on hold? We'll just give everyone that opportunity. We're getting up to about, around that sort of number. Okay, so the consequence of COVID-19, disappointingly, but understandably, is that some of those are on hold. So where we invest our money is going to be is critical at the moment. And of course, without the cash flow, that has an impact. So thank you for sharing that. That's really valuable data that will go on and be able to share in the wider community as well. And of course, there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to that. It is merely a consequence of the challenges that we're all dealing with. So let's take a look at meeting space design. As we map out these new routes for attendees, let's not forget, for instance, how we accommodate those with disabilities. So all of the rules that were in play with regards to managing people and the flow of people and the traffic and the signage and the wayfinding, it's all still there. COVID-19 is likely to only further fuel our desire for meeting spaces that are more alike to a home setting, and that's something we've become very familiar with. Still, those spaces outside of the meeting room, you've told us as venue operators that they are critical. That one that has that that linger effect, should I say, where people just want to hang out because it's a cool space. The investment that we're seeing in those areas is as high, if not higher sometimes, than the meeting room itself. And we know that when we go to venues, there are places that you want to hang out and there are those which you don't. Here are some examples. Venues that were only open in the last 4 or 5 months, so very cutting edge. And when you consider them, here we've got one in Belgium. We also have 2 there, or in London in the United Kingdom. One in the top right may well be New York. You can just see, these examples of these recently updated spaces are offering what we now start to referring to as the third space. So you've got meeting rooms, you've got breakout rooms. These third spaces are the ones where people really want to be and hang out. And you can see the level of investment that's gone into that. Well lit, good acoustics, good lighting is of course critical in those areas, but you can see they're well thought out and invested in. Here's another example that we have here, big open plan. Again, when we think about, as we come back to small meetings and smaller groups, these spaces are going to be critical for us in the sense that we can offer those for smaller isolated groups. So if we have those spaces as well at our disposal, I would definitely be thinking about how we promote those. And recycled furnishings as well, you have that opportunity. Just end with another inspiring space. Look at the colour, look at the vibrancy, the points of interest that you have going on here. I'll actually draw your attention to the one in the far right, which, although it's the smallest of the image, we're starting to see more of these spaces, and you may have seen it in IACC's recent work that we did at MPI's World Education Congress, where your presenter is right in the centre, and then you have your attendees all the way around the room and multiple screens in those rooms. In the guide that we'll be releasing, the pathway to reopening, we will be providing some new layouts, some that respect social distancing, bring in the element of hybrid meetings, also maximising the space as well. So watch out for these sort of spaces because they work incredibly well in respecting social distancing and having the presenter right there in the middle. And again, just some more examples of the spaces that have been invested in the last 12 months. Notice the one that we have in the bottom right-hand corner there, that's ETC Venues in London in the United Kingdom. A very wide landscape room, and that actually has, I think, 6 screens, projectors and screens coming in. Consider with hybrid meetings as they come in, you may well have a connection between audiences as well as between content, as well as between presenters. So you may well have the need to be showing simultaneously different screens. If you have that ability or the ability to equip your room in this way using portable equipment, that can lend itself very well to that. Now, this is embracing the new norm. We've got, for instance, venues that are reopening that are being used as a studio for the hybrid meeting. To the right here, we have Vantage Venues in Toronto in Canada, where it's a live stream out to a virtual audience, but the presenters are coming together to be professionally filmed within the venue with the right lighting, the right cameras, the right microphones, the right backdrop, and importantly, the right bandwidth to be able to facilitate that. So it's a new norm, a new product. To the left, you'll see a room that's set within a conference center environment that is using rounds in a cabaret style, but respecting the social distancing. So these, with our photography, with our marketing, we need to be aligning ourselves to the coming months, and then carefully, as we come out the other end, need to be reverting and pivoting back to the environments that will follow. Now let us take a look at the culinary trends. I did mention right at the beginning, food and beverage is a massive topic. It's a massive topic alongside, I would say, social responsibility and sustainability, and I will get onto that as well. But let's take a look at the meal break times as well, because they're important, and again, they're going to be impacted as we move forward. They're going to be disrupted, but the opportunity is there for us to change without stepping backwards. In that, I mean that the 93% of venues that operate continuous refreshment break stations, the evidence at this stage, or the indications that we're getting at this stage, is that not every continuous refreshment break station is closing down, but actually all they're doing is there's more management of those spaces going in. So the timings, having staff there, so allocated timings for a group, staff service on the areas where it's hot and cold drinks that are not easily sort of in a sealed can or container, and then being able to provide those stations and those areas for dedicated lunchtime settings as well. So it doesn't have to be that those highly creative spaces are closed down, we just have to operate them differently. It's still a careful balance between the healthy diets and our healthy appetites. What do we mean by that? Well, we do have this huge appetite for healthy options and health and well-being, but also we do have the nutritional needs as well of our attendees, and we have to be able to cater for both. There are highly nutritional and attractive foods now which are equally healthy for us, and if you're not already focused on those in your food and beverage and culinary areas, I would encourage doing so. And we had lots of our panel discussions during IACC Virtual Connect which talked to that point. One of our greatest challenges over the next few weeks and months is how we make the changes to our operating, how we incorporate the safety measures that we need to, the protective hygiene measures, the wrappings for our food for attendees, without going in completely the wrong direction as it relates to sustainability and our social responsibility, because it is still really important for attendees, and they want to be seeing it. So let's think about those coverings that we use, and again, still seek out those suppliers that are not using single-use plastics. Things like wrappings like bamboo and paper and others, which can still be sealed and have the safety element, but be biodegradable. Again, another one of our big slides here, so a lot of data, but I'm just going to ask you to get to the first area of it, which said 74% made significant changes to their food. So 74% of venues made significant changes to their food offering in the last 12 months. So that just shows that it's a really important area for us. In the past year, there had absolutely been an increase in the number of requests for dietary preferences, not dietary allergen-related preferences, but those which are a preference rather than a requirement. The use of locally sourced food and beverage items is still incredibly important to us as venue operators. Now, when we look at the other research that's out there, again, MPI's research on the 2020 outlook aligns completely with that sense of importance. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we don't think that is going to drop down in terms of a priority. It just means we've got more priorities that we have to take care of. But interestingly, let's go to the bottom of that. 39% of venues do not offer activities beyond the bar in the evening. Now, that's a concern for everybody that has picked up that data and looked at it. And the reason being is that those incoming generations, when our meetings and conferences return, they want more stimulus, they want less alcohol, they want to be able to do stuff in the evening, so there's not just talking in a bar area. And still, a number of us are not seeing that on the venue side. So one takeaway from this year's research is, as you prepare, as you look to bring in new things, as you look to enrich that experience, maybe, just maybe, there are some great low-cost options to make it fun. You don't have to install a Skittles alley or something of, at that level of investment, but just doing stuff in the evening as opposed to just having the bar service would be a great step. We talked about the AM and PM refreshment breaks, and that risk. We are seeing where those stations are reopening at the moment, that the staff are in there, and some of the options for no touch machines are being considered. Anything that's got no touch or low touch is very popular at the moment in terms of being installed into venues. So let's look at those managing of the dietary needs. Again, still really important when we ask, does your venue provide the food labelling with allergen information for every meal? Good numbers there. 15% are still not doing it. But look at 23% of us as venues are not providing allergen information at the break stations. In our opinion, and in the opinion of those experts, that's an area that really does need to be focused on in the years, in the months to come, because we really need to get that number down to 0 if we can. I mentioned MPI's meetings outlook. Again, that was just published in May this year. So very fresh data, again being built up from a perspective of pre-COVID, but an important perspective. 79% of planners want to increase the wellness efforts within their events. Now, this is really interesting because 50% of those were attendees who said that they wanted to do that. 32% were the planning staff, said that they wanted to increase wellness efforts in their events. In MPI's research, only 2% of the hotels and venues that participated in the survey said that they wanted to increase the wellness efforts at the events that they host. There's a big disparity there between venues in general. Now, I'm sure they're not IACC venues, but needless to say, it's a very interesting difference between our buyers' perspective and the venues. As we move on from food and beverage now, just a reminder, IACC's Guide to Managing Dietary Requirements and the second one, which is Trends in Nutrition and Delegate Wellbeing, are still highly relevant. We update them periodically, and there's some great tools in there as you, again, start to just interrogate and have a look at some of those policies that you've got in place. And if this time gives us nothing more than the ability to plan and adapt and prepare ourselves more fully for a different operating in the future, take a look at that and see how closely you align with those best practices, which had a lot of great input from the food and beverage community, both on the IACC side and also nutritionists. Communication and collaboration and our technology, of course, there's a huge amount that is going to change related to that. Now, 91% of venues have said that you prefer outright purchase of your equipment as opposed to leasing the technology. So that's a big number, and that is maybe linked to the fact that the costs are decreasing. LCD screens, large flat panel screens, the prices are tumbling because of consumer demand. So there may well be that appetite. However, one note of caution as we look at that, because as COVID-19 and hybrid meetings are becoming potentially a new norm for the future, and more meetings will have a hybrid element, there'll be different types of equipment that are needed for that foster collaboration, that bring lighting into the meeting environment, and they may well, I beg your pardon, carry more cost an unnecessary cost, and maybe not used quite as much as some of the other equipment. So leasing option may well be preferred for those as we understand what the new norm is and what the long-term impact is beyond the coming months. Charging stations, I'll just actually bring it back one moment there. I skipped over that unintentionally because there was this trend towards more device charging stations being an essential piece of equipment, in fact, up there in the top 5. And these are shared stations that everyone can plug into, whether desktop or in bar areas, etc. We do anticipate that we'll see a step back from that in the short term as people prefer not to share technology. Of course, they'll bring their own and they'll clean their own and be, a little bit sensitive to that. But that's an area that we will watch very carefully as we move forward. Free webinar platforms. Now, a lot of us as venues are exploring how we grasp this opportunity to deliver hybrid meetings. One word of caution that's coming out from those that are very familiar with these spaces and are delivering solutions in it is some of these free webinar platforms are often unsupported. They carry lower security features, and therefore we do need to be careful as we move forward with those. Interestingly, 3 areas or some of the ways of differentiating between the types of online meetings that have been really useful for myself and our project team is we broke them down into 3 broad areas. One is video conferencing, which we know well, our Zooms. A small group of people, everybody can talk or have the access to it. That's video conferencing. A webinar, this will be a larger group, a larger audience, maybe with 2 to 3 speakers and limited Q&A, maybe only on the chat section like we have today. And then you have the webcast. So you have video conference, small groups, webinar, mid groups, 2 to 3 speakers. Webcasting is like a broadcast, like IACC's Virtual Connect, much larger audience, no voice or video from our partners. So terminology for us as venue operators to be very familiar with as we tune in to those new meeting inquiries that we get, those RFPs, in regards to understanding exactly what the requirements are from our meeting planners. Will venues need to provide more lighting and microphone technology? That's a question that we need to answer, because it's not only just sharing one presenter, you may well be sharing the views of an audience. There are technologies. I think the one that we see there is a Crestron piece of equipment that facilitates the webcasting within venues. Low and no touch technology is going to be more popular. So when we look at things like audience collaboration tools like the Slido that we've used at many IACC conferences over the last 2 or 3 years, they're great because they don't require the passing round of microphones and others. Crowd Mics is another brand that you may be familiar with, which allows you to use your smartphone as a microphone. And then where we expect to see short-term measures coming in is the individually sealed speaker kits with microphones, slide advancers on USBs, just having that label to say it's been cleaned and sanitized before being handed over to the presenters. And venues really do need to be able to talk about hybrid meeting solutions. I learned today from my colleague Mehdi that one of the universities, I think close to Washington, DC, has brought in and launched an online hybrid meetings qualification and course to build competencies in that area. And we're watching really carefully to see what will be the effects on the venue's IT or AV teams in regards to needing to provide a stronger bridge or even a service as it relates to hybrid meetings. There's a lot of that being covered in the full research for both Meeting Room of the Future and the Guide to Reopening. So as we come to the end of this section now, we always ask the question, how much do you agree or disagree with statements related to cybersecurity? 8.8 out of 10 users feel that cybersecurity will be a greater priority in the next 5 years, and a smaller number are having to deal with cybersecurity issues. Now, we do recognise that there have been a lower level number of issues in regards to data breaches and cybersecurity issues as they're linked directly to conferences. But that doesn't mean that we need to take our foot off the gas. We need to be prepared that they need to be robust and safe environments. Then virtual reality technology. Now, all I can say related to this is since COVID-19 broke, the amount of investment research that's gone into these, it's probably doubled, quadrupled by those companies who provide it. That's good for the future as we look forward, because, virtual appraisal of meeting space is something that millennials are very comfortable with doing. It's good for the environment if you can appraise fully a venue virtually. And it also actually, if you're really savvy as a venue, it can help you involve more stakeholders in the discussion with your client. Because if they're not traveling and spending a whole day appraising a venue, then you maybe can swap that out for 2 or 3 different webinars to be able to discuss content, come up with creative ideas. Augmented reality is an area that we're watching with great anticipation. Our colleagues PSAV, Matt Harvey, who's a contributor on this research, is particularly vocal in regards to the development of areas like Apple glasses to come in, which will further fuel and increase our familiarity and our willingness to embrace augmented reality. So that's a big step from virtual to augmented. And again, as we consider that 44% of planners are millennials, they're going to embrace this sort of technology. And these wearables may well be available on property as well. Now, we've made a deliberate link here to digital flip charts and COVID-19. However, the link was, or the trend was already there as it related to providing a more sustainable solution to the paper-based flip chart. So this was already heading in that direction. But of course, as we look at the needs today, it's a cleaner option. There is less flip chart paper being scattered around the room, multiple people putting it up, multiple people contributing, because the technologies here is that actually anyone within the audience, on many of them, can contribute and it will go up onto the flip chart. So again, low touch, no touch is going to have an influence maybe on our ability to embrace them. And the last but probably the most important area, as I mentioned at the beginning, is our social impact and our environmental qualifications. They are not going away. In fact, in record numbers, we've got IACC members who are participating in and completing the IACC Green Star certification. They are getting themselves ready for the new normal, where our sustainability credentials, our social responsibility credentials are going to be really important. Still, there's some areas, though, when we look at venues' capabilities in being able to say that we have good policies and statements in place. We had 13% did not have a social responsibility statement, or 13% were unsure of whether there is a social responsibility statement. And that's a real missed opportunity. Still, a very high number of us are not able to donate to food banks and outreach programs, and that's linked to all of the red tape that's put around our ability to donate unused food. And then we've got our millennials, and as we come to a close now, our last couple of slides, we asked this question for the first time this year, and it's a fascinating one to ask. First question we asked, on average, 40% of our workforce are millennials at IACC venues. Quite a respectable number. But only 18% of those are in leadership positions, i.e. in those positions where they can influence key decisions. So as we look at our changing and evolving product, as we look at how we drive our businesses forward, maybe one of those ways for us as leadership within the IACC venues is to encourage and provide clearer plans and career development for our millennials to get into those positions, to be making more of a difference, to be having a powerful impact on how we regenerate over the next 3 to 5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, I've run over a little bit, not too much. I normally run over a lot more, but I'll be very happy to open up to questions. We had one that came in just as a follow-up from Norma, which I will read out. Norma was looking for trends to protect our venue from liability when guests do arrive back. Yes, so that is exactly what Norma was looking for in that regard. We do cover that in the guide to reopening. We are looking into that. We can't provide legal verbiage. We recommend that venues absolutely need to get good advice on the front end and get a good law firm at the other end who help them make sure that they do the right thing. There is absolutely a need for venues to do and put in place procedures prior to arrival within their contracting, reminders. We cannot wait until the attendee turns up on day one of the event and then ask them to start signing documentation. There needs to be steps that are taken before then. We hope to be able to get a lot more detail for you on that. And indeed, if we can find a legal expert in the coming weeks that could come on and is willing to speak to this, because that's one of the challenges, then of course we'll do that. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me today. If there are no other questions, there is one just came in. One of the themed food and beverage items that we're looking at is virtual team building cooking classes, so all the guests can interact. That's a great way of providing an opportunity to interact beforehand, and a really great way for you to be able to get, to show that you care beyond, when they turn up at your venue. So thank you for sharing that, Murray. Another one in from Marlene as well. Do you have any EXP or experience in hybrid meetings? Like, how many delegates is it possible to still have a great meeting? That's really interesting. Watch this space for a new product that IACC is bringing out, which is called the multi-hub meeting, and we're looking into that in a lot more detail. So I can't talk too much more on it now. It's still in its development space, but we will be looking at what is the best balance and mix to be able to create a hybrid meeting, or if you do it for low numbers, how does that need to differ for higher ones? It's uncharted territory for everybody, but we're looking to bring some great opinion across there and provide you with some answers and some advice on how to prepare your venue for multi-hub meetings in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the IACC webinar today, and do look out for the future webinars that we've got coming up, one every 2 weeks. Do look out for the guides and the meeting room in the future. Stay safe, stay well, plan for the reopening, and wish you all the very best. Take care.